Well, Joey and Darren, thank you so much for joining me on this episode of Lynch with a Leader. It is an honor to have you guys.
Man, thrilled to be here. Thank you.
Great to see you, Mike.
This is going to be fun. So we're on here today to talk about something new that you guys are involved in that is really, man, it's going like wildfire right now. But prior to RO and prior to y'all's lives connecting, y'all live two very distinct lives. So, Joey, talk a little bit about the story that got you to where you are today.
Yeah. Well, I'll take you back about 11 years, Mike. So my son Harrison, who is now 16 years old, who's the greatest kid in the world, has always been the greatest kid in the world. When he was 5 years old, he was playing his first soccer season, and he was, as great of a kid as he was an equally poor soccer player. And I'll just call it out, be very direct about that. And, you know, if you've been around youth soccer, if you've been around, you know that the really successful youth soccer players are ones that seem to have some kind of criminal background or maybe in like a work release program. These are aggressive kids who are scoring goals. Harrison was not one of those. And so this season, everybody on the team had scored a goal except for Harrison. And so we lugged the lawn chairs out to the Saturday afternoon game, and about midway through the game, something really magical happened when Harrison reared back his leg and kicked the ball, and the ball glided over the grass. And this memory comes back almost like a Last of the Mohicans scene, right? Like a very dramatic moment, slow motion, James Horner music. And so the ball hits the back of the net, and these sweet parents went wild. They knew that Harrison had scored his first soccer goal and everybody else had scored before him. And then his coach runs and picks him up. But there was this moment, Mike, right in between the ball hitting the back of the net and his coach lifting him up when Harrison did what 5-year-old boys do, is he turned over to the sidelines to lock eyes with me, to see the pride and the smile on my face and share this really beautiful moment together, which it was beautiful except for one minor detail, and that's that I missed every bit of that moment that I just described. Because when Harrison looked over at me, all he saw was the top of my head as I was looking down at my phone. And I had this realization at that moment that something was wrong, that I didn't quite have the words for, but just this something inside of me was wrong, that this device that I had, this phone that I had a relationship with it, and that relationship was getting in the way of my most important relationships in my life, that I had dreamed for all of my life of having kids and having a son that I could watch play sports. And all of a sudden, at the moment that I've dreamt of for my entire life, I was looking down at something on my phone, and it could have been an important work email, it could have been a sports highlight, it could have been who knows what it was, but I just knew at that moment that something was wrong. So that sparked in me this hunger to get it right. And it would be a few years later when my business partner, Heath Wilson, texted me and said, hey, I have an idea. I'm struggling with my phone, and what if we solved this for our families? And what if we solved for our families? What if we solved it for a lot of other families? So it was then that RO, which is our business that helps people reclaim their time from technology every single day, when that started. And that moment I look back on all the time. We all have those moments, but for me, that was the moment that put me on a trajectory that led us here today.
What were you doing professionally at that time? What was your life consisting of at that time professionally?
I was in commercial real estate, so I was, taking all the work emails and doing all the stuff that people who think they're important do. That I was on my phone a bunch, working commercial real estate deals. So by the way, it was, and let's just note, what a terrible idea of Heath to call a guy in commercial real estate to start a tech company. So I think Heath just has some poor judgment in general. But when he texted me, it was actually less about, hey, this guy would be good at tech. It's more, hey, this guy, me. I felt it because I had fallen on my face so many times on this, but maintained this core belief inside that the world could look a little bit different.
Darren, how did you guys get connected? What was your end? You get to pastor, wear the hat of a pastor for a living. What was your story of how you guys connected on this journey?
Well, we connected because we have a similar story and a similar passion, and we started engaging in this space of wanting to provide some sort of leadership for helping people as they manage their devices. Not terribly dissimilar to Joey, our children tend to be the ultimate mirror that they hold up towards us. And I have 3 teenage daughters. So, I live in a house full of girls. There's always someone crying in my house. It's usually me. But, I from time to time, I take my girls out on daddy-daughter dates, right? I allow my girls to choose which restaurant, and I just want to have a time of focus and look in my daughter's eyes and say, how are you doing? What's going on in your heart? And so there was this 1 week where I decided I was going to do all 3 dates in 1 week. And I wanted to ask all 3 of my daughters the same 2 questions. And I was feeling quietly confident with my dad game.
Yep.
And so I thought, you know what? I'm going to ask each of them, what's dad doing great that he should do more of? And what is dad doing poorly he should do less of? And each of them had something that I was doing well, something I was doing right, that was different. They like it when I take them to school. They like it when I cheer them up. They like it when I trip and hurt myself, so please do more of that. They all had something. So, but when it came to what is dad doing wrong that he needs to do less of, completely independently of one another, they all said the same thing. I wish you didn't spend so much time on your phone. And those words just punctured my heart. Every parent that I have met who has kids older than mine say the same thing. They say these years are precious and these years are fleeting. And my oldest is 18 now, so we're no longer counting forwards, we're counting backwards.
That's right.
From when she's moving out of the home. We're not talking about first times, we're talking about last times. And to know that I somehow was exchanging the infinitely valuable with the infinitely trivial, I just felt as though this is a problem in my life, and as a pastor, as a shepherd of a community, I know that this is a problem in our church. So we decided that we were going to pioneer doing a digital fast. We would take 28 days, and as an entire church, we would step back from the way that we were engaging in digital technology. And it turned out that doing it as a community was so much easier than doing it as an individual. So we started doing that, and that's how I met Joey, because we have similar passions, and we decided that we needed to partner up and do more together.
That's fantastic. And I think you guys speak for the average person listening to this. I don't think anybody hears this and says, I really am working in 2025. I want to spend more time on my phone. That's one of my goals next year, is to spend more time on my phone. I don't think anybody says that, but yet we don't know how to get out of our own way. Joey, what are some of the stats that you and Heath have shared about how much time people are spending on their phone that would be shocking for people to digest?
To me, the most shocking thing about all of it is our relationship with our phone is defined by our constant proximity to it. Is that 91% of us have our phones with us 24 hours a day. We don't have to move our feet to reach our phones. So they're next to our bedside tables when we're sleeping, and they're with us. Maybe when we're showering, we're not. It's not, right? And so it's that constant proximity, but the proximity is not enough, right? That's not the real problem. The real problem is the implications as a result of that, of our constant proximity. And it's really that our phones have really staked a claim on the most important areas of our life. They have staked a claim in our moments, the little moments, like the date nights that Darren talked about with his daughters. They've staked a claim in our time, and just the overall time that we have, is us being with them all the time. They've staked a claim in the way that we can focus in our memory. They've staked a claim in all these different areas of our lives. And the thing that's interesting about it, and Jonathan Haidt released a brilliant book that everybody knows called The Anxious Generation, and he made the greatest statistical case about this. But the thing about that was that those may have been eye-popping stats, but all they did was confirm what we all know in our hearts. They all confirmed all these things that we already knew intuitively, because we are all experiencing it. And so, yes, it's shocking, but maybe the more shocking thing is that it doesn't have to be that way. Yeah. That's what I have, this core belief. It actually, we walk around almost defeated, like we're relegated to this. Oh, I'm so addicted to my phone, there's nothing I can do about it. I completely reject that. Darren completely rejects that. And that's why we're on this journey, is because we all know how deep the problem is. We all know the anxiety it's causing in our kids. We all know the strife that it's causing us. We all know that it's causing an intimacy crisis in our relationships. But here's the great news, is that it doesn't actually have to look that way.
Yep. You know what I love about this is every great thing that God did in Scripture that people were involved in all began with a burden. It all began with somebody going, man, I can't sit on this knowing the walls of my city are torn down. I got to do something. I got to make a move. What was the hardest part for you guys? Now, I'll speak to you first, Darren. You're trying to move a congregation of people to go, hey, we need to break. We need to fast from. We need to take a break from digital media. What was the scariest part of that burden for you and Joey for leaving your career to begin this journey? What was the scariest part? What would you guys say? And I'll start with you, Darren.
The scariest part for me is that I'd never heard of a church or anyone doing anything like this before. And I just sort of felt like I was going to roll out to my church that we were going to do a digital fast and that people's reaction was going to be, hey, listen, bro, stay in your lane. Teach the Bible. You know, like, can we just have a preacher that preaches the word?
Yeah.
You know, like, leave me and my phone out of this. I was really surprised at the appetite for leadership. People want leadership. If you ask people, have you ever done a digital detox? Everyone answers that the same way. They say this, no, but I need to.
Yep. That's exactly right.
And so what we decided to do is move it to the front and just say, all right, we're going to make this the conversation we're all having together. So this is, you know, parents invariably look at their own faults in their children and they're like, my kids are on their cell phones too much. You know, Where did they learn it from? You know, and we all know that is true. And so it's kind of like, if you're a teenager, if you're a single person, if you're an adult, if you're a grandparent, what if we all went on a journey together? And what we learned is social scientists call this problem a collective action problem. A collective action problem is when we all know that something is having a detrimental impact on us, yet none of us want to individually step back from this particular problem. So you ask a teenager, if Instagram is making you depressed because of comparison, why don't you get off Instagram? They'll all say, I can't. All my friends are on it. So we all know collectively this is problematic, but as individuals, we don't seem to have the agency to be able to solve it. So it turns out that the best way to solve or address collective action problems is with collective action with a community.
That's good.
And now, we didn't know this when we started it, right? This is all the stuff that we discovered along the way. But it turns out that a church going on a journey together is easier than when you do it by yourself. The thing we started to say to our congregation is, all right, you've decided you want to at some point do a digital detox. If not now, then when? We're all doing it together, so join us. And the biggest obstacle I felt was honestly my own insecurity in leading our church doing this. And at the end of this journey, 100% of people said they were glad they did it.
Wow.
I didn't hear a single person say, you know what? I really wished I'd spent more hours doom scrolling cat videos. I really missed that. No one said that. 100% of people were glad that they did it.
What did you learn most about you? What shocked you that you felt going through it? Because I'm sure you had a million times you wanted to silently break the fast and go see something. What did you learn about you?
Well, to understand that, you need to understand what we defined a digital fast was. And we wanted people to think about their smartphone through the lens of distraction versus utility. Not all apps are created equal. You have distraction apps and you have utility apps, right? Distraction apps are things like social media and games and news and video apps. Even email is a distraction app, right? Utility apps are things like phone and text and calendar and GPS. If you're getting on Southwest and you use the Southwest app to scan your boarding pass, you don't then sit on the plane and play with the Southwest app for the next 52 minutes, right? It's a utility app. A utility app is not destructive, where the distraction apps, they're the ones that are the wormholes of what takes our time. For me, what I learned most about myself, Mike, is my obsession with email and my fear that if I didn't have access to email all the time, I was going to lose control of my life. And I check email at that point, 65 times a day. I mean, I roll over in the morning, and if I see the little notifications that I've got email, the first thing I do to begin my day is check my inbox. What a terrible way to start the day. Being thrust into all of the business side of my life, And so I felt like if I wasn't, pulling up at the lights at a stoplight and like checking my inbox, then I was just going to get, it was going to be out of control. That turned out to not be true. If I checked my email twice a day on my laptop, I was able to equally manage it. And in fact, it was more efficient because we all get emails that are spam, or they're a FYI, just blind copied on something or whatever. Well, you're able to sort of process them all in groups together and then deal with them. So it was way more effective in managing my email. And what I learned about myself is this sort of addiction to my inbox. I did not need to be ruled by it, and I ended up having a much more positive experience having email off of my phone.
That's really good. So, Joey, you're in real estate, and you are in commercial real estate, and you get this burden from the soccer game. What was the scary part for you, leaving what you've known to chase this burden, hoping others feel the same way?
Well, I think you kind of named it right there, is that it was hoping that others felt the same way. I knew what it felt like for me. I knew that I had missed moments. I knew that something didn't quite feel right. We're on a date night. My wife and I both get dressed up, and then we end up looking at our phones for the date night. Like I knew that it just didn't feel quite right. But what I didn't fully know was, and this is 2019, and so there's a documentary that came out then called The Social Dilemma, and that was kind of a little bit of a forerunner. Andy Crouch had talked about it a little bit before, but this was before Jonathan Haidt. We still needed some stats to convince us of the problem.
Right.
And so I think the scariest part for me was, am I just talking to a few people? And it was before long that I realized that everybody had some version of a soccer story. Everybody had some version of what Darren mentioned with his daughters of, Mom and Dad, you're on your phone too much. And so the interesting thing about, one very interesting insight in the process with this was the fact that our kids have stopped asking us as they get older. They stop telling us that we're on our phones too much. And I'll explain what I mean by that. When they're young, our kids will say to us things like, Daddy, no phone. We heard stories from kids who were just learning to talk, or kids who didn't even talk, grabbing their parents' phones, and taking them somewhere else. Kids have this natural need for connection, and they hate this unnatural object we placed in between them. They hate it. So that is getting in the way of their natural need for connection. So what was interesting to me, the stories that we heard was, my kid, they're 8 or 9, like they've stopped saying that to me now. And that's dangerous, because we should actually celebrate when we start hearing our kids say, Daddy, no phone, Mommy, no phone, because it means two things. The first thing that it means is that our kids like us and that our kids want to spend time with us. And the second thing this means, this is so powerful, is if you have heard, anybody listening, if you've heard your kids criticizing you for being on your phone, celebrate it, because that means they believe they're more valuable than your phone.
Right.
And that's a great thing. And when they stop asking, when they stop saying it, all of a sudden, even subconsciously, they've been led to believe, or by their experience, that our phones might just be a little bit more important than they are. So that quelled the fear. That's scary in and of itself, but that quelled my fear of thinking that, is this such a small market? Absolutely not. Yep. This is for Christians. This is for non-believers. Jonathan Haidt is an atheist himself, right? And he's the one who says the church should be leading this. In fact, I believe in one reason I just applaud Darren so much for doing this at his church. Not only is culture, would they follow us if we did something? They're actually waiting for us as the church. Even if they don't believe in a risen Savior, they're waiting on us to lead. And what Darren has done in the Digital Fast has given clarity. This is a clear path, and we all know what happens. When you have a plan, you have confidence, and you go boldly in that direction. And then what happens? You become more like the person you aspire to be.
Yep.
And so the thing that I love so much about this is, and this, again, I'm a believer, but I'm in a tech company. I'm not vocationally in the church. It is so clear to me. It is so clear. This is the church's moment. This opportunity is unprecedented. unprecedented as believers, as Christians, to live it for ourselves. It has to be authentic first. If we're preaching it, if we're making pronouncements, we're not doing it. We're hypocrites, and that's not going to go anywhere. But we are doing it. And then other people see what we're doing, and it's Matthew 5:16. They see our good works, they glorify our Father in heaven. And they may not yet believe in a risen Savior, but as they see how we're raising our families, and they see how we're stewarding technology, which is the biggest pain point in their lives, what are they going to do? They're going to come closer, and they're going to learn about a risen Savior, and then they're going to learn good news that brings joy, that brings eternal life, that brings salvation, right? Like, it's a great thing, but we can begin by going into the world, by addressing that most poignant need that all of us feel inside.
Yep. You guys have created a product. You sort of began with a shoebox, listening to the story and reading about the story. I heard about you guys from two great friends of mine, Kevin Scott and Eric Blumenthal, were the very first to turn me on to you guys. And, man, I just fell in love with what you're doing. And what began as something, I've got to create a way to get the phone out of my hand. The shoebox, most of our wives, that's not in home decor, USA. So you created a product. So walk us a little bit through, Joey, the evolution of how it started to where the app is today. And tell everybody a little bit about that.
Sure. So RO, that business began, you're exactly right, with us saying we just need to get our phones away from us. We need to join the 9% club of people who spend time away from their phones on a daily basis. So let's find a designated place to put our phones. And we found while that was helpful, most everybody I know either has a drawer or a shoebox, so it's already available to all of us. And so that wasn't quite enough. The physical space was good, but it wasn't quite enough. We needed something that reminded us, hey, it's time to spend time away from your phone. We need something that gamified that experience, that quantified this, hey, here's how you've done every day, to quantify the amount of time, because that's so powerful to see what you've been doing rather than just having that physical place. So we iterated on that for years. We have a beautiful product, the RO box, where you charge your phone, you place your phone in it, it quantifies the amount of time you're away from your phone. But then we found the real powerful piece of the experience was the app experience of helping people reclaim time every day. So, and that's what we were doing, because here's the amazing thing, Mike, if you spend 2 hours a day off your phone, you have gained 1 month out of your year. And what is the most scarce thing, our most valuable resource is our time. So at our very essence, what we're talking about, and then you can fill in the blank, what do you do with that time? Is it a date night? Is it a walk? Is it a little bit of time of personal reflection? Who knows what that is? But this all began with, let's have this physical place. Let's have an app that pairs with it. But as we've evolved, the RO app is a standalone. It quantifies the amount of time. It gamifies the amount of time you're away from your phone. And that's where it gets really, really powerful, is quantifying that data, seeing how you're doing it, participating as a family, competing with each other, participating with friends in your small group. And for us, this was such a beautiful complement to the digital fast, where the digital fast is a collective action within the church, where people are going through an individual experience of their own through the book and through the workbook. And then knowing they're doing it together, and where we're able to come in with RO with the digital fast is to quantify the total amount of time that a church has collectively spent off their phones during the digital fast. And so you see, I see the impact this is having on me on a daily basis. And then I see on Sundays how much time that I'm with other people, that we're all doing this together. And then re-entry, and Darren does a masterful job of taking you through 4 phases of technology reimagination. The last one is, now what do you do? Now you're at the end of the fast, now what do you do? And Darren said, hey, would you all be willing to be that tool for people who are part of the digital fast to re-enter into the world by using that tool to help you reclaim time every day?
What's the biggest put? Because I agree. Everybody goes, yes, I need to start. I need to do this. My kids need to do it. I need to do it. My spouse needs to do it. What's the biggest pushback you get of why people don't want to do it? What are the fears that stand between people where they're at and making the decision to do the right thing? What are some of the common fears, and how have you seen those fears really be answered? What would you guys say?
I'll start with just a couple on our side. One of them is I work on my phone. Got it. Okay. That's which again, like, I understand why I need my phone for work, or I'm always on call. I think that as people, those begin to become a little bit frail. I believe those I'm always on my phone, which again, I totally get. I do understand some people legitimately are on call, but I would say that is a small portion of people out there. And what we're not talking about, even with the digital fast, this is not abstinence from your phone. This is, like Darren said, it's removing the distraction from your phone. So what we have found is when people will say something like that, it's like, okay, I got it. Do you have 32 minutes for a family dinner? Do you have that? Because it's those moments, it's those, and then it's building the muscle. And then the real problem for people is that they have not built a muscle. You believe that it's all or nothing, as opposed to recognizing it's hard to be away from your phone. We've grown accustomed to that. This is a habit that we're in that is very difficult. So instead of spending 2 hours off your phone today, spend 2 minutes away from your phone today. And let's begin to build that muscle little bit by little bit over time to where it's natural for you to be away from your phone. There's a stat from Dr. Gloria Mark at UC Irvine who says that it takes 23 minutes and 15 seconds to refocus after you've been distracted. When we started this journey with RO, I said to my wife, when I heard that stat, I said, other than sleeping, I've not done anything, and I mean this is not hyperbole, I've not done anything uninterrupted for 23 minutes and 15 seconds in the last decade. Now, I will tell you, I spend on average, I know this through the RO app, I spend on average 3 hours and 22 minutes away from my phone every single day in uninterrupted focus on whatever the thing I'm doing right then. So what I will tell people is you feel the pushback, because you're naturally going to feel this rise in you, is just take it from the chief of sinners here and saying, this does get better, but it does take time to do it. I'm 5 years into the journey here, and I've built up a muscle that makes it feel normal to be away from my phone.
That's really good. What would you say, Darren?
Well, I think that people are not sure what to do, right? There's sort of like, this is so overwhelming. There's some studies that find general population in the U.S. 6 to 7 hours a day on their phones. Some say one study found that Gen Z is 7 to 9 hours a day. I mean, it's just absolutely mind-blowing. But it is so integrated in our society. And to change that, people are just not sure what is the way forward. And we say sometimes around here, like, surely we've got to be able to find a way forward between either addiction or Amish, right? There's got to be a third way here. And,
very nice.
And so we provide a bit of a roadmap in 4 movements. The first 7 days is to detach. Now, when you are detaching from something, you will experience some degree of withdrawal. This is another reason why it's great to do it with other people. When you get all the distraction apps off of your phone, you will open your phone and realize there's nothing cool to look at anymore. And you'll do that over and over again because we do it as a reflex. So it's honestly, it's kind of uncomfortable for the first 7 days or so. When you start getting into the second 7 days, this is what we call discover. Now, what's interesting is that you discover things about yourself. This technology has provided a way for us to distract and numb ourselves away from our own feelings. So this is what happens, is when you feel anxious, when you feel afraid, when you feel sad, or when you feel shame, you grab your phone, because that's an uncomfortable feeling. We don't like to feel that way. So we distract ourselves with visual candy, and that just makes us not feel the feelings anymore. It suppresses the feelings. By the way, there are some studies that have found that because we are stuffing feelings like this over and over again, this could potentially contribute to the rise of the panic attack. You hear a lot more people having panic attacks these days. And one of the working theories is we keep stuffing all of our feelings down, and like a beach ball that you're trying to hold underneath the surface, at some point, this thing's coming out. Well, the second movement is to discover about yourself, discover about other people. How many times have we completely missed a signal that's going on in our teenage daughter or son because we've just been, checking the fact that an Amazon package has just arrived, And our child moves through, they're upset, and we don't even notice. So we discover things. We discover the voice of God. The third movement is to delight. What happens? And I got a chance to talk to Jonathan Haidt about this, and I was talking about our third movement. People really start to experience joy. And Jonathan said, do you want to know the brain science behind why people experience joy into week 3? He said it's because our dopamine receptors reset after a couple of weeks. What that means is that social media has caused us to flood our brains with dopamine. We have an overdose of dopamine, and dopamine stops doing in our brains what it's supposed to do, and that is creating pleasure and creating joy as a surge of joy. Because we have so much flooding of dopamine, it doesn't impact us anymore. To reset your dopamine in your brain, it takes a couple of weeks. Couple of weeks into this digital fast, you start feeling joy again. It's like a reset for the senses. It's like becoming human again. I remember in week 3, the first time I did this, my youngest daughter asked me to come watch her bounce on the trampoline outside. And Mike, it was such a funny experience because I walked outside, I was barefoot, and I felt the grass under my feet. I smelled the air. There was this light breeze. It was 72 degrees. I didn't have my phone with me. My daughter was bouncing on the trampoline, and she was giggling and squealing. And I had this conscious thought, oh, this is a better life. It's like I've become human again. That's the third movement. The final movement Joey was talking a little about earlier, that is to determine what do I want my long-term digital habits to be as I look forward. Instead of this device having mastery over me, how can I put this back in its place? In the book, we talk about that you need to Marie Kondo your life. Marie Kondo is famous for helping people clean out their closets. And she says that you need to grab each item of clothing and ask, does this spark joy? And if it does, you keep it. And if it doesn't, you throw it out. I want people at the end of a digital fast to ask the question, does having Instagram on my phone spark joy? Does TikTok spark joy? Does putting email back on my phone spark joy? And if it doesn't, then don't put it back on your phone. One study we found in our church is that 50% of people did not put social media back on their phone after the fast.
Wow.
Now, it doesn't mean that they're never on social media. It just means that it's not with you all the time. It's not like an appendage to your body where you are constantly having this visual candy, this junk food that is trying to tempt you and woo you in all the time. If you don't have that on your phone, you don't look at it. It's as simple as that. You don't eat junk food if there's no junk food around you.
That's right.
You're not tempted.
Yeah.
So most people, the biggest apprehension they have is just not knowing what to do.
Yep.
And the digital fast provides a roadmap to be able to actually do something.
And I'll jump in real quick and you know, for people who are in churches, and if there are church leaders here who are listening, what a gift you can give. I mean, what a gift you can give to your people to experience that moment with your daughter jumping on the trampoline, Darren, for looking for, and this is what I'm encouraged, again, not being vocationally in the church, I'm very encouraged by seeing a movement in the church kind of away from that seeker-friendly model into more formation. People are coming to church because they want to know absolute truth.
Yeah,
they want to know what to do. Tell me what to do. It is no longer choose your own adventure. It's here's the way, here's the truth, here's the life. And here's a better way of living. So what a gift you can give to your people of clarity on the thing that is hurting them most.
You know, and we all grew up without it. So I'm 55.
Right.
I mean, the thought of carrying a phone around back when we grew up, it's foreign. Yeah. Now it's normal. And to our kids, they'll never. So my children are older than yours, and we'll hit that here in a second. But, you know, they don't remember a life without a phone. Yours that are younger especially don't. They never knew a time without a phone. And so here we are at this season. So I want to say this to the two of you. Thank you for what you've done, because it takes pioneers to find new territory. You guys, as our good friend Tim Elmore said, you've marched off the map. You've marched into dragon territory of going, I know this is where we need to be. There's a lot that's going to happen to get there, but something has to change. We can't keep doing one of your stats, and I heard you guys throw it out, you and Heath, Joey, 89% of the time we go to our phone, it's of our own doing.
Yes.
It's not like we even have anything on there. We just have to pick it up and look at it to make sure I don't have anything on there,
Right.
and determine we're not near as important as we thought we were, but I got to keep doing it, right? And you just create this habit. For somebody, Joey, that goes, okay, I'm in. I hear you. What's their next best step to get involved? If a listener, they're driving in today and they're like, dude, you know, we used to, I remember Ike, we were talking about Ike earlier. He used to always say, God never convicts you of something he doesn't want you to change, right? So if you feel this conviction of going, dude, I can't keep doing this, man. This is out of control. What would you tell them the next best step is?
I would say, I mean, if you are part of a church, go rally your pastor. Say, I need this. Our church needs this. When they hear, and you guys know this because you're pastors, my suspicion is when you begin to hear things consistently from people in your congregation, you're going to listen.
Yep.
And so what I would say is go to digitalfast2025.com, and there's a button right at the right hand that says secure your church's spot now, or schedule a call with one of the team for Digital Fast, and just say, I want to hear more about this, and tell your pastor, hey, I want us to be part of this. Here's what's funny about this, guys, is I can't wait. Our church is doing it in Knoxville, Tennessee. We're doing this in January. I can do all this on my own. I can remove apps on my own, and obviously I'm very conscious of this because of our business, but I cannot wait for our church to do this for me personally, because here's what it does also. It's going to give me an excuse to tell my family, here's what we're doing. My wife, Kristen, she's aligned with it too, but just to say, hey, here's what we're doing together in January. So it diffuses the tension that we all feel also of us being like, hey, you're on your phone too much, saying to our kids, as opposed to saying, hey, here's something we're doing as a family. Why are we doing it as a family? Because that's what we're doing as a church. So this actually diffuses so much of the tension of us trying to mandate what to do. And then to Darren's point, not knowing what the heck to do.
Yep.
So to simply answer your question, I would love to people just go to digitalfast2025.com, secure your church's spot now, tell your pastors about it. We're going to have, and this is just, Darren and I kind of laugh here, we're going to have hundreds of thousands of people doing this in the church in 2025. It's January, it's Lent. If you have another time frame for your church that makes sense for you, we're open to those rhythms as well. But those are a couple natural rhythms. But to know that you're doing this with a lot of other people, to know your church is doing it, and then that means your family's doing it, and you're doing it with clarity. Again, I just can't imagine a greater gift that you could give to your church body and to your family to go through something like this together.
I love that. And we're going to have a link to RO. We'll have a link to the Digital Fast 2025, and to your book, Darren, on the Digital Fast, because it is so good. So I want to say this to both of you. Thank you for what you're doing. You're making a difference. And you'll probably never see or hear the changes that are happening. You'll get your testimonials that'll come in, but the greatest ones won't be the ones you ever hear. And so I've had the opportunity, like both of you will one day, to stand at the top of a altar. I've done probably 500 weddings I've officiated, but standing there with my daughter was a whole nother ball game. And I'm looking down the aisle with my daughter on my arm, and my son at the other end of it, who's receiving us and is going to do the giving of the bride piece of the ceremony. And I guarantee there was not another email I wish I would have read, or another story I wish I would have seen on Instagram. Man, that moment, you can't get it back. As you guys sit where you are today, what do you want your children, when they're 40 years old and they're raising their children, to look back and say to you individually about this decision to make this move for the greater good of all, but for their greater good? What do you hope they say one day when they're 40 to you about this decision you've made?
Well, I'll jump in. We're in an unusual time because I have teenagers, as I mentioned. The adoption of smartphone technology has come while I'm a parent, right? The parents that are coming after me, they're learning from our mistakes, frankly. My kids smartphones didn't exist when some of them were born, but this technology has sort of seeped its way in while we're parenting in real time. So what a lot of parents have done is what I did, And that is when my daughters were old enough to do sleepovers and old enough to do school sports, I found an old iPhone in a junk drawer in my kitchen and I gave it to them. The average age for a child to get a smartphone in America today is 11. Now, what I did unknowingly is I gave the most powerful computer that has ever been created as a commercial or as a consumable device, and I gave it to my child. And what I didn't know then, that has now been proven in terms of the research, is the correlation between social media and smartphone use and the mental health crisis that we are finding in this generation. Suicide rates are way up, depression is way up, cutting is way up, and it used to be that they thought, well, maybe it is correlation. Now they have found that it is causation. So the jury is in. It is clear that there is a direct link to the use of this technology and the kind of experience people are having and the impact on their mental health. Well, there's a bunch of parents that are learning that in real time, and we've given our kids smartphones and we're trying to work out what are we supposed to do about this. What I would say, and a lot of parents tend to, they use this metaphor as they say, well, the ship has already sailed, right? And I think that what I would say is if we were watching a ship sail and we knew that there was something broken on it and it was going to sink, then we would do everything we could to turn that ship around, right? To use that metaphor. There's something that we can still do. I am hoping that when my children are 40 and they're reflecting on the very unusual season that we have been in, because they're like no guilt to parents that are my age. We didn't know. There wasn't any information that was shown. Like, we're just working it out in real time. So there's no shame. But there is something that we could do. And what the coaching that I would give a parent is do a digital fast as a family and then have a conversation on what do you want things to be like in the future. So parents, grandparents, friends, everyone, we're all doing it together. When my kids are 40, I hope that they say, Dad, in a time of confusion, this mattered so much to you that you were willing to have difficult conversations with us, my children, and also try to have difficult conversations with our church. And it's now turned out to be a difficult conversation with lots of families to try to provide a way because the stakes are really high and this really matters.
So good.
Mike, to answer that question for me, and it's a bit of an admission, and I hope it comes across okay, is that I really hope that millions of families are impacted by this. I really hope that millions of churches, hundreds of thousands of churches, are impacted by this. But I'm doing all of this for my kids. I'm going to get a little emotional talking about it. I'm doing all this for Harrison and Gianna, and I'm doing all this for Kristen, my wife. I'm doing it because I know how fleeting my time is. Yeah. I know I do. You look and it's so darn short. And I know as Harrison has a couple more years in high school, I know what happens. 90% of the time we spend with our kids happens by the time they're 18 years old. So I got just a little bit of time left. And by spending time away from my phone, I'm able to extend that time that I have with them right now. And so my motivation is my kids. And when they're 40 years old, I hope they can say, Dad, you were always there. When I say there, not physically, I mean you were locked in with us. And they know the feeling of me not being locked in. When Gianna, my daughter, when she was 10 years old, we finished a movie together. This is right when Aura was starting. And at the end of the movie, she turned to me and she said, Dad, did you know that's the first time we've ever watched a movie and you haven't had your phone? Which was such a gut punch. Like, come on, Gianna. Right. You know what I mean? And so it hurt, but I was also proud. I was like, wait a second. It's kind of crappy that I've messed this up for 10 years, but I've just done something great. And so what did I do? I couldn't wait for the next movie so I could do it again because she notices. She wasn't congratulating me. She wasn't condemning me. So 4 years after that, this was in May of this year, I know because I wrote this in my journal the night that it happened in 2020. But in May of this year, I read that in my journal. I told Gianna, 14 years old now, and I said, G, do you remember that? Do you remember saying that to me? And she goes, oh yeah, and she laughed. And she said, Dad, it would be so weird if you had your phone during a movie now.
Wow.
So what's normal in her life has shifted dramatically in 4 years. And that's not her just loving Harry Potter with me. What that is sharing a moment together. So when she's 40 years old, I hope she has hundreds and thousands of those types of memories where I was fully locked in on whatever it is of us, whether it's us doing a puzzle the last Saturday night. And by the way, this is just a side note for all the parents. Our kids, like, they crave so deeply our time with them. Gianna, her love language is quality time, and she and I have been a little bit distant over the last month until we did a puzzle for 4 hours on Saturday, and then she was snuggled up in my chest like a little baby right after that at 14 years old. We just have to find those things, and we are completely unable to detect those things that are important to them and be investigators of our kids so that we can then speak into their lives and let them know they have value, let them know that we love them, and then we can be close with them. So that's a long-winded way of saying that everything I'm doing here is for my kids. And here's the great news is that everything you can do, everybody listening, it can be for your kids and for future generations, and it can literally change the course of their lives by making this decision.
Yeah. So good.